I am the narrator, and welcome to my parlor. Tonight's story is Vespers. I am a wanderer. Permit me to explain. I have no address, no occupation. Those are for others. Stability is not for me. It's for others. Allow them schedules and routines. Exempt me. I need adventure. I have seen and heard things most never do, things they would were they like me. I would pity them, but I treasure my experiences. I love to share them. At the campfire, I am the storyteller. If you read farther, you're my listener. Again, my stories are unique, and I treasure them as such. They are one of a kind, for good or ill, and both can be treasured. This one is ill, and I treasure it. I would secret it otherwise. You may wonder how I live, with no home and no job. I sleep beneath the stars, and on my off days, the sun. I eat what I find and what is given. Nature itself gives most. Folks speak of lean years. I have nothing but, and I feel all the better. At times I've been a bum, such is my turf. At these times my last refuge is that of the down and out, the house of worship. You may claim I abuse charity. Be not naive. They offer their hand. Only a fool would decline. If I did not, I would be their lesser. I have integrity. This is only when all else fails, and all else almost never fails. These folk are generally accommodating yet intelligent. They accept without embracing you. Obliged to the former, the latter prerogative. Manners precede honesty. If they like you, they won't tell you. If they don't like you, they won't tell you. I care not for their opinions, only their accommodations. This is one exception, a church like no other. It was dusk. The sun had set. I was exhausted from hiking and needed refuge. Alas, the region was unfamiliar. I spotted the black silhouette of a building ahead. Don't fear yet, though sounding ominous, I had encountered many. I had spent many nights therein. Some were owned and with permission, others not and with liberties. At some I shared the floor with others. At some I slept alone as I preferred. Their atmosphere was always a matter of me, not the structures themselves, no matter how eerie. I expected nothing different. I approached to reprise the routine I had long perfected. The place looked old. That it was a church was not stated but inferred. I found the front door and rang its knocker. No response. I proceeded to step 2 to find any unlocked doors or apertures. There were none, but this was no deterrent. Travel strengthens, stability does not. I needed scant rest, which I could gain with or without a roof above. A forest stood beside the structure. I was about to settle. Just as I turned, however, I heard a sound from inside and turned back. I pressed my back to the wall and slid back slowly to the front door. It was open. A man, I assumed the priest, stood therein, peering back and forth, not knowing he sought me. This was not a giving church. I did not blame them, given the parasites they must have drawn. For me, however, it would be, beneath their notice. The door closed, steps began and ceased. I set forth, sure I was unseen and of a basement entrance. Not one I had been to lacked one. I was confident I would find what I sought. The darkness that hid me could also hide my target, but I could see through it. I found the trap door beneath the growth. So far, so good. The knob, smooth and cold, turned slowly. I did not relent. It did. I was sure the priest heard not. If the lock was broken, the door was frozen from disuse. Good. My lodging went unseen. Bad. My entrance was delayed. To sleep I would toil. This would be no issue. I strained again, sure of success. I cast the door aside, slowly, quietly. Before me was an empty chasm. Unfazed, I stepped in and down a short staircase, landing on a cold floor. Before me stood a door, poorly locked like the one before. It yielded. Noise was no concern, given its location. The room was sparse, a stone floor, walls, and ceiling. No windows, no light to speak of. The smell of cloistered must. In short, perfect. I removed my blanket from my backpack and laid it on the floor. There I would sleep lightly and wake easily. There was a chance I would be found, though I was sure I could dispel the priest with ease. Thus I could wake and leave early, though I feared not I wouldn't dawdle. My eyes had just closed when footsteps sounded. I was surprised. It had been silent until then. I had assumed the priest had too retired. I thought nothing of this. He was likely tending to last-minute concerns. Besides, the sound came from above, not from the stairs. He had not heard. Undeterred, I rolled aside. My eyes had just reclosed when a second sound. 2 steps, then 3, then 4, then I lost count. At first from outside, then the door creaked open and they entered. Who, I wondered. Is it still in operation? While the sounds were innocuous, I was more watchful. Risk had grown, even if at worst I would be expelled. My thoughts then changed. My hosts now interested me. The strange, the unusual, was my passion. A church that utterly neglected its appearance, that held services in the dead of night, whose sole priest was disheveled. My mission was now twofold. I could not be found while watching those who would find me. First, I had to find stairs from the basement to the first floor. Luckily, this basement was once in use. The staircase must have existed. I pressed my back to the wall and crept across, knowing my goal was nigh. In seconds I found the knob, cold and damp as those before. It was less likely to be locked, again given its location. Still, I'd never encountered such. Who would lock a door? An intruder need already be inside to enter. Whatever. It was no match for my experience. I had to be subtle. I was inside now and closer to my hosts. Again, I did not think this an issue, and quietly pressed my back against the surface. It succumbed. Quickly, like the one outside. I sneered at my hosts. Why even bother? Above, the steps had ceased. Their service must have begun. I reasoned the visit could have been brief, but there were too many. Whatever was occurring, I would soon see. Before me stood a decrepit staircase, just like the one I had descended. At the head was a trap door. Beyond sounded distant words. It was likely only liturgy. I slowly ascended. I won't repeat my method, or how I suddenly opened the door. Beyond was a room with only a hook on the wall, a shawl dangling therefrom. Humble gray, no decorations. I assumed it a priestly garment, though I'd never known priests to dress so humbly. Their clothes are always regal. Yet this one was destitute. Perhaps this was to be expected. I then thought to don the shawl and enter the service. I entered subterfuge, and it would make a story. I would exit through the basement, return through the front door. So a parishioner was late. At least I was a parishioner, and if not, a new convert would excite them. I opened the door and entered the precipice, plain and unadorned. The door closed loudly behind me. Disguised, I had no need of subtlety. I did not crack it open and peek through. That was to be exposed. Instead, I simply opened it and joined the congregation. There I heard them clearly. Their tongue seemed ancient, used only for such services. They had kept tradition, as expected of an isolated church. The sanctuary was vaster than I'd guessed. Its wall and ceiling were dull amber, its floor dull brown. Saints adorned the windows. Candles burned on brass platforms around the walls. The pews were chipped and weathered. Parishioners filled them, wearing shawls. The priest led from his platform at the front. It was stained and rusted, aged and neglected. I scanned for open spots, and, finding one in the far corner, crept forth. They either saw me not, or were too engrossed to care. I took the spot, the last in its pew. None looked up or in my direction. In the clear, I observed. Now I moved only my head, subtly, so I would not seem out of place. My eyes fell first on the icons. They first seemed like all others. Soon they seemed otherwise. I recognized none of their subjects or the painting style. They were human only at first glance. Their dimensions were elongated. Behind them were simply washes of color with no scenery. At first I simply thought the artist eccentric. Alas, this could not be. I thought farther. Perhaps their doctrine was eccentric. Plausible, but doubt remained. I hated their chant, but could not identify their language. It resembled none I knew, and I knew many. It was more than their own dialect. The roots of the common tongue would remain. I heard not even that. Who were they? I subtly studied their features. They too were peculiar, though not at first glance. Their skin was jaundiced, their eyes sunken, their postures stooped. They seemed aware only of their chant. I had to leave. I could sleep beneath the stars, but could make no sudden movements. My entrance had been smooth. I hoped my exit would be likewise. Alas, I had to remain until dismissal. Then would join them therein. Until then, again, I would remain. The service was already underway, and a while had passed. The end must be near. It wasn't. The chanting went on and on. Not once did it make sense. They never tired, and I grew increasingly uneased. At last, the priest waved. To my relief, I could now vanish into the night, though couldn't. He stared forth and waved again, then reached in his cloak and produced a steel bucket, raising it before them. It was as rusted and decayed as all else. The first parishioner stood and walked to the pulpit. I watched intently. The priest lowered the bucket to his chin, and he drank thereof. He then returned to his seat, lips stained with brown fluid. Had they not even clean water? I was repulsed. The next followed, then the next, and so forth. Each drank and returned likewise. How long would this last? The pews were full, a while at least. At last, my pew. I would not leave as planned. I would have to partake. This I could risk. Though outnumbered, I was armed and no stranger to confrontation. Those to my left partook. Distance prolonged the inevitable. My turn came, but I could not move. My feet felt anchored to the floor. I was at a loss. The congregation turned and stared. Their empty eyes penetrated. Both fight and flight beyond me. I defied all logic, including my own, breathing deeply and obliging my hosts. I rose and stepped slowly, drawing ever near. The parishioners turned and watched. At the altar I failed to avoid their shepherd's eyes. Though a stranger, I was not excluded. He lowered the bucket and I inched forth, the center of attention. Its contents appalled me, bubbling, boiling filth, above and beyond the absent sanitation. Still, I felt compelled. The fluid was inhabited. Creatures writhed therein, long and sinewy, fanged maws and feelers, no heads, limbs, or eyes. They squeaked, they squealed. The congregation watched. I closed my eyes and gulped. The absurdity struck me, caring what they thought. I turned my head and tore away as the worms reached my mouth. I closed it in defiance and stared down the priest. His eyes flared, for once showing emotion. He stood the bucket on its altar and stared back. The congregation rose and lurched forth, arms outstretched. I spun and darted out into the lobby. The priest shrieked, driving them forth. I ran out through the front door. Outside loomed the forest, above it the night sky. There was refuge, but not rest. To stand still would be my end. The door creaked open. The priest emerged. His followers would soon join him as I vanished amongst the trees. My thoughts raced with my feet. The woods were unfamiliar, so the advantage was theirs. I could not see in darkness and grew afraid. One could have appeared at any time. Such thoughts I suppressed. They would only hinder. Footsteps sounded behind me. 4 walking in 2 pairs, far from the clamoring horde I had feared. They moved slowly as they had inside. Why, even when in pursuit? What so slowed them? I'd no time for morbid curiosity. To my side I heard bubbling. A clearing was nigh. I followed the sound and would feel the ground soften as I neared. The steps continued, unrelenting. I nearly fell forth. Luckily, my hand landed on an object. A bridge's rail. I had reached the stream. Crossing would be easier than expected. Ahead sounded the squeals of worms, closer than I thought. I would simply cross and keep moving. I took 1 step and was shocked. Their volume swelled. Soft, wet things lapped at my feet and ankles. Gazing down in panic, the stream teemed with them, writhing forth. I darted there across. My mind slept. Only my body was awake. I should have collapsed, but adrenaline propelled me. Then the moon shone. The clearing lay ahead. The steps had ceased. I slowed, pushed the branches aside, and stumbled in the clearing. The moon and stars shone bright above. Before me sprawled a field of tall green grass. I sighed in relief, but this was short-lived. The footsteps returned to my fore and grew louder. Blast! Damn it! Why was victory so fleeting? I ran farther, to no use. The grass spread and the steps continued. 2 figures stood in the distance, the priest and a parishioner. Our eyes locked. I am not one to avoid confrontation, that is, unless greatly outnumbered. Cowardice saves lives. I don't know why this seemed sensible, but I sensed it. I approached, hoping words could succeed where fists fail. Fists and the knife hidden in my pocket. They stood in place. Soon we were face to face. What are your names? I asked flatly. What is the significance of the worms? They did not respond. The tension was palpable. At last they moved. The priest reached in his cowl and withdrew the bucket. His subordinate dropped his cowl. It fell to the ground. This answered more than I had asked. The man wore nothing beneath his garment. His form was gross and mottled. His skin was translucent, his internal organs visible. Within his stomach were the worms. wiggling, writhing in black bile. This was demonstration, what I could have had I submitted. I cannot guess why they so desired this. Clearly, I did not. I turned and marched off. They followed. I paused and turned to see them. They did the same, and we resumed. This reoccurred until I saw it futile. At last, I paused and threw my hands. What do you want? They raised again the bucket. I eyed it closely, with a plan. Soon I would be rid of them. The priest stretched it forth. I dropped to my knees, and our eyes met. He smiled slightly, bent his knee, and tilted the bucket. Again, the worms again writhed forth. I closed my eyes and opened my mouth, feeling the fluid on my chin. It dripped down my throat. I fought not to gag. Something soft and sinewy slid in my mouth. I bit. Yes. Its movement ceased as blood seeped down my chin. I opened my eyes and stared in defiance, the worm falling to the ground. Theirs widened in shock. I speared the priest to the ground. His bucket fell with him, spilling its contents. The worms shrieked and gradually stilled. My point was clear, if it was not already. I stomped the worms, ground my feet in their backs. Fluid sprayed foul in all directions. The parishioner's jaw dropped. He backed off in fear. His master lay prone, cowl open, stomach like those of his flock. I loomed above and raised my foot. Most would try to placate me, but he was not like most. He simply gazed, awaiting his demise. I drove my foot therein. The skin cracked, bile sprayed, worms leapt forth. I grabbed and bent each until they snapped. The parishioner had vanished in the woods. At last I turned and trudged off. Years have passed. I still am without address. I still walk everywhere I go, to places neither I nor anyone else have been. Only now I am followed. Others see me as a leader, indeed as a priest. Their numbers grow daily. I alone wear the cloak and hold the bucket.